Okay. Good afternoon, Mellon Mays Fellows. My name is Dr. Donovan Ramon. I'm the program assistant for the Mellon Mays Fellows Professional Network. Welcome to our last webinar in this year's webinar series. This one is about preparing for graduate school in the summer leading up to grad school, or in the year leading up to graduate school, depending on how your timeline is. I'm joined today by Tanya Braddux from Michigan State University. Tanya, tell us your feeling about yourself, please.
Oh, sure. Hi, everyone. Yes, it's Tanya Maddox. I'm a PhD candidate in the English department at Michigan State University. My specialization is contemporary African American literature, and currently I am writing my dissertation, which actually focuses on the representation of the interaction, I should say, the interactions between African Americans and Asian Americans and how those relationships are depicted in African American literature since the 1980s.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much, Tanya. Now, for our Melons listening, I understand you'll be hearing advice from two literary folks, but know that our advice is probably going to translate into many different fields because we're offering general advice on how to prepare for your first semester getting your PhD. I'll begin briefly, and then I'll turn it over to Tanya so you'll get to hear two different perspectives on how to prepare in the months leading up to beginning your beginning graduate study. Okay? If I can get my window open. Okay, here it is. So what we're going to say to you today, they're tips. They're not things you should do or that you have to do. They're tips that we've collected, that we've observed ourselves, or that we've collected through our experiences teaching or mentoring or interacting with other grad students, how to prepare for beginning graduate school in the months leading up to it, like preferably the summer or a few months leading up to it. One tip I would offer you is to read the gaps in your knowledge. What do I mean by that? You know, we're all coming from undergrads, we're all very smart, we've all read a lot, but in many cases there will be things that we have not read that we know will be pivotal theories or theorists in our fields going into graduate school. So I would urge you, if you know there are gaps in what you know, use your time between finishing your bachelor's degree and beginning your PhD to rectify those gaps. Use that time to read broadly in terms of some of the theories or theorists you'll have to know when you begin graduate school. Okay, it's not a matter of reading exhaustively. You're not going to remember everything you read, but it's a matter of being able to read broadly and understand what some of the debates are in your field. If you understand some of the major debates in your field, it'll help you when you write your seminar papers, and especially when you start teaching. Okay. Second thing I will share with you, another tip you might want to consider in the gap between finishing your bachelor's degree and beginning your PhD. Very basic tip, but earn money. I know when I finished my BA, I graduated in January, and I began my PhD in August. And in that, what is that? I began in August. In that 7-month interval, I tutored students at the Huntington Learning Center in Manhattan. I decided to become a tutor, A, because I needed the money, and B, because it helped me hone in on my pedagogy. So I'd urge you, if you decide to find employment, and employment could come in many forms. It could be a standalone job like the one I had, or it can be an internship in your field. Whatever job you get, I would urge you to make sure it's a job in your field, broadly conceived. Even if it's not particularly in your field, if it's a job tutoring or teaching, that's also very useful because it helps you develop your pedagogy, which will be very important for you as you begin teaching as a graduate student. So the second thing you could do in this time between finishing a bachelor's degree and beginning a PhD would be to get a job, some type of job that is related to your field, or that is going to help you develop your pedagogy later on. Okay? Thirdly, this is something I did not consider up front, but I wish I had, strengthening your language skills. Many, if not all, PhD programs will require that in order to get your PhD, you'll have to show proficiency in a foreign language. Some of you may have this proficiency already, others of you may not. But because this is a hurdle you'll have to overcome while you're a PhD student, why not try to get this out the way as early as possible? So if you know in the summer or in the months leading up to beginning your graduate degree, if you know that there are courses you can take, a course or courses you can take as part of your on your campus or at a neighboring school, or if you can take a placement exam that will help you to place out of the foreign language requirement because you know it already, then you should do so. So in short, the third tip I will give you as you prepare for your first semester of graduate study is to think about strengthening your language skills. Figure out what the foreign language requirements will be at in your new department, and then when you know what those requirements are, try your best to work towards completing them as early as possible. Honestly, of all the things that could trip you up as a grad student, you don't want something this minor, such as learning or placing out a foreign language requirement, to hinder you as you pursue your degree. The fourth thing I will say, and this is very important, and I didn't take a lot of time doing this in my own case, so I'll urge you to do what I to not do what I did. I didn't have as much time as I thought I had to move in and explore the area. I would very much urge you to, when you know what school you're going to, spend a lot of time thinking about where you'll be living, because where you live, you have to think about a lot of things where you live. The distance to and from campus, the distance to and from where you be shopping to get groceries, if you have a car, where you need to go get gas and get your car serviced, things like that you don't really think about till the last minute. They're very minor up front, but when you are knee deep in the first semester and you have many courses to take and or teaching and a lot of reading to do, you don't want to be hindered by these minor areas. So in short, the fourth thing I will say to you as you prepare to begin your PhD, find a place to stay, of course, in the area, but more importantly, explore the area. Know the area well. Know places like where you get your laundry done, where you can get groceries, social areas where you go to have a good time if you want to as a grad student. Okay? Things like that you don't want to worry about once the semester begins because you'll be too busy and perhaps too worn out to worry about it. So in the month or in the maybe the 6 weeks leading up to when you begin your PhD, make sure you find a place to stay. Make sure you understand the distance between where you're living and campus and where you're living and everything else you need in your life. The last thing I'll say to you, and this is again another suggestion, is make sure you take some time off. Getting a PhD is a lot of work. It consists of teaching and writing and reading, lots and lots of reading, some traveling as well when you start going to conferences, and it can be exhausting but also incredibly rewarding. With that said, it might be worthwhile to take some time. You can decide what that amount of time is. Take some time for yourself so that you can relax, hang out with friends and family, travel to other places, visit new people. Take some time to yourself because getting into a PhD program is a huge accomplishment. So look at it as a way to reward yourself for getting to a PhD program and to relax and to chill and to get your creative juices in order for when you start your PhD in the fall. So those are some of my tips, and I'll turn it over now to Tanya, who will offer her own perspective on what we should consider when we begin our PhDs.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many things I would love to say. Don touched on a lot of things actually that were very similar in experience. Let me just start with some of his points. One of the things that he did bring up was a lot of reading, and a lot of times we figure when we go into graduate school we're still just students. Well, we're not just students, we're being professionalized. And so you have to sort of mentally make that transition from being a student to scholar, really, because at some point you will be teaching your subject. That was really my experience. My first year, actually, I was on a fellowship, so that meant that I had a heavier course load because I was required to have a heavier course load according to my contract, my funding contract. And it's really basically a preparation. A lot of things I wasn't really prepared for in terms of his first point of filling in the gaps of my knowledge. That was really for me to really catch up to a lot of the other students. So that actually benefited me to be able to just work as a fellowship, but it is a lot of work, and you have to get used to the fact that it's a lot. The courses, the number of students in the courses are a lot smaller. In my program, you can have the maximum was about 5 people. So think about that, where maybe you've gotten away with not getting the reading done, and so you sort of hid behind others. Well, you're going to be expected to kind of step up and really show your knowledge. So be prepared to make the transition from just being a student to actually being scholars, engaging in scholarship with the professor and your fellow graduate students. And so that means increased reading, as mentioned by Don. It is definitely 10 times more than what you have gotten in undergraduate studies. So that's a point that I want to make sure you understand. Another thing that that was also really good in terms of earning money, well, I had a sort of different situation. I was already doing tutoring at my undergraduate institution, and I would pick up little tutoring jobs and other side jobs in preparation for what I was going to do in the fall. But really, I used that money towards my moving expenses because I moved from New York, which is a commuter place, to Michigan State University, which is basically in the middle of Michigan. I'm near farmland. And
Wow.
my biggest concern, which you should be doing right now, is really check out where will you live,
Mhm.
because I think we sort of think of it in hindsight, but really that should be the stresses of just being able to take care of yourself while you're in graduate school come with just the stuff that's off campus. So you really need to think about uh, if you have a car, how far are you willing to live away from campus where it won't impact the amount of money you may get maybe in a stipend. If you're on a funding package and they give you a stipend, you need to budget that out. I've been fortunate to be able to get graduate assistantships and be able to live. I mean, minimum loans, but what you want is to be able to budget yourself while figure out your budget before you get there. So that includes transportation, that includes food, grooming, and I say grooming because where I'm located, I have to travel outside of my area to just get someone to do my hair. So that's something that you kind of have to think about. That has to be factored in if you're not used to it. I was not used to not having conveniences. I came from a commuter college, like Brooklyn College. And so that's something that you want to keep in mind. The other thing that he brought up was I didn't know about the language skills. I knew it was a requirement, and I thought, Spanish was automatically offered, but it wasn't at my institution. Actually, we had to fight to get that to be taught on our campus, and I took advantage of that during the summertime. But that didn't happen until the following summer. So really look into what are the requirements for your program. Become very familiar with their curriculum for the graduate students and where you need to be at each stage, because sometimes it shifts. My program shifted a lot. We lost people as far as faculty, so that kind of changed what courses were offered in the per semester, really. So you need to keep up with a lot of the changes. If you're given, one thing I need to say this is, and I didn't know until I got here, if you're offered a financial package that requires you to do a teaching assistantship, check and see if they have a union.
Mm.
Michigan State has a union. It protects you, especially if you're required to teach, so that you're not going over a number of hours, because you still have to give time to your coursework. Also, it provides medical. It provides medical insurance, so that helps too, and tuition waivers. So make sure you know your financial package. Keep track of when it begins, when it ends. If you have to start looking for funding, you need to be very aware of these things before you go in. And also know your rights, because on some campus, even if you have a teaching assistantship, they don't treat you like an employee of the university. They may just treat you as graduate students. Here at Michigan State, they treat us as a part of, we are employees of the university. So we do have certain opportunities to be a part of faculty events and certain responsibilities. So know your program, know what is required of you in that program. So that's one. I have so much. Let's see. I already spoke about point number 4. Yes, that point number 5. Take time for yourself.
Hmm.
You really do need it. One thing I will say, always check, and before you get there, make sure you check and see if your university actually offers what we call wellness or support services for graduate students. Because we protest a lot for it here, we have wonderful services. So that, and they offer it for free. So not only do you get, like, say for instance, not just medical, but if it's, say for instance, if you just need time to relax, you need a massage, that's offered. If you need support, some of us were writing our thesis or we were writing our dissertation, they have support groups for that. One of the things I did make sure to join, and that was after I met with one of the faculty members here, and he encouraged me. He said, make sure you join one of the graduate student associations. Were also very helpful, because what it did, it just created a community of support so you can get through this thing we call graduate school, right? Because it can be hard on you. So make sure you seek out those support systems, because you will need it. Try, if you're the first one in your family that's getting a PhD, most of your family members do not understand what that is. And if you're really close with your family members, they may have the tendency to want to call you up a lot, but you're busy. Find a way to so that you don't sever your ties, find a way to nicely tell them, I am busy, this is not like, it's not like undergrad. It's not. Think about this. And one of the things that one faculty member said to me, they said, think of it in terms of, if you were working a 9-to-5 job, how many hours would you be putting in? And so you have to think of yourselves as people who are actually working. This is your job. So once again, it's a mindset, it's a mind change that you have to get used to, and it's going to be like this every step of the way. When you're going in for your master's, you complete your master's. You go into the PhD program, and you go through your coursework. Then you do your exams. Then you defend your dissertation proposal. When you get to the dissertations, I mean, you're going to need support every step of the way, and you're going to need that time to yourself. You don't work to the point where you get lost in it, but I've met those who have gotten so lost in it they don't finish, and we want you guys to finish. We want all of our melons to be successful. So keep that in mind. That hello? Oh, one second. I think because I was okay. You see me now?
Yep. I see you and hear you.
My machine went blank, so I didn't know what was going on. So I think that's it. Let me see. I think there's one more thing. Support, funding, and classroom, and another thing that kind of seems to seep up a lot is you might be asked to join a lot of different associations. You have to kind of use discernment there, especially when you go, as you get further along and more advanced, your time, you really don't have the time. So you really need to learn how to budget your time starting now. You can't show up for everything. It's impossible. And then be able to finish well. So keep that in mind too. I think I covered all my points. So now I'm going to open it up for any questions you may have. Very specific questions, anything you wanted clarification on, I'm here.
And let me second everything Tanya said. Yes, everything Tanya said is right on. So yes, and now you have the benefit, because in previous webinars you just had to hear me yap for a long time. Now you have two of us, so you can ask as many questions as you want, and you'll be able to get feedback from two different people. Yes, we are both in literary studies, but a lot of our experiences can translate over to other fields you'll be in. But let me just emphasize everything Tanya has said to you. Planning ahead is very important when you're a grad student. It's not something I did very well when I first started out, but planning ahead can be broadly conceived in terms of knowing what you have to read, knowing the gaps in your knowledge that you want to rectify, or knowing where you will live in the future, knowing where everything is, because you don't want to have to worry about that once grad school begins. There's a lot. As Tanya eloquently put it, there's a lot to worry about when you begin your PhD. Doing laundry, where to get your laundry done and where to get groceries should not be one of them. So that's why you want to make sure you plan ahead as much as you can. When it comes to foreign language, absolutely find out what the requirements are. And hopefully you have some background already that could meet those requirements. If not, find out how you can meet those requirements as early as possible. You don't want that, of all things, to hinder you as you pursue your PhD. Okay, let me just be quiet. All right. For the rest of this session, we will answer your questions. Please, I know we can't physically see you, but as you did last time, please feel free to type your questions on the side of your screen where it says group chat, and Tanya and I will be able to read them and answer them one-on-one. Sorry, answer them publicly so that all of you could hear the question and answer.
Okay, well, Don, 1 second. I
Yes.
see here that this feature is disabled. I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
Do I go in? No, that's chat. That's screen share. That's
Q&A. I don't. Okay. I'm not sure why it's disabled.
come out in or.
On the left-hand side where it says Q&A, it should be working.
Okay. Or everything
But if
else?
not, let's see. What else can we do? If not, so for many of you who are tuning in, I sent you a link to the Google Hangouts page. So if you could pose your questions there, we'd be able to see them. To the Google Plus page where we have this, where I promoted this event. So if you put your questions there, I know a few of you did last time, we'll be able to see the questions and read them out loud. I don't know why the Q&A feature is not working. No, I don't know why, but still, I don't want that to hinder us. Let's put your questions on the Google Plus page, and we'll be able to answer them. Okay, and I'm going to open that page right now.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's the link that I sent all of you in order to click on it on Google Plus. So with that said, any questions?
Anybody? Is everyone there?
Yep. I know. Yeah, you don't really see anyone. I see that there are 4 people watching.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
See, now I see your writing on when you just said feel free
Yep.
to add questions here. Okay, I
Good.
see that.
Okay, good. Yes, I just added something on our page. Feel free to add questions here. So there, folks, feel free to add your questions. And I understand that one of the limitations of using Google Hangouts is that you can't see the people physically there. But I know there are 3 of you watching, and I'm anticipating that you are melons and you're very inquisitive. And if not, we will call it a day. But I'll give you a chance to think of questions you might want to ask us. And yes, this will. I know a few of you emailed me earlier. This is being recorded on YouTube on our private webpage, and we'll send you a link. So if you miss it, we'll send you a link. I'll send you a link later on today. Danya Matos, I'm about 10 years out from undergrad and went to law school at night, and now embarking on my PhD. Would your advice change? Oh, okay.
Okay.
Would your advice change? The advice, are you talking about all the advice about how to prepare for grad school in the summertime, or the advice we talked about generally? Let's see. Oh, we have a.
I don't think my advice would change. I don't think it would change that much.
Mm-hmm.
As far as preparation for a PhD program, I guess it depends on which department. That's what I'm thinking. It depends on which program and department that you're going to be going into. Then it may change slightly, but as far as the preparation in terms of where you're going to live, that won't change. It's pretty much the same. The rigors, based on, I have a colleague who's, she did law school too, and now she's finishing her PhD. The rigors are pretty much the same. It's slightly different in terms of, well, for the English department, for us, it's more discussion. So it may be slightly different from maybe the format of instruction in law school, but other than that, as far as preparing your scholarship, it's still the same.
Yeah.
Looking for those programs for support, still the same. It still holds true.
And Dania followed up with saying both. So, but both in terms of in the response to my last question, I would agree with everything Tanya said. My advice would not change. I still think that regardless of how long you've been out of grad school, you still have to, well, maybe you don't have to, but one tip that I notice is that tip that I use myself, use the gaps in the knowledge or use the time off to fill gaps in my knowledge. Try to earn money, strengthen language skills, find a place to stay. This is all basic stuff that we'll have to do as PhD students anyway, so look at it as trying to get a heads up in the months leading up, trying to get a heads up in the months leading up to your PhD, rather than doing it all at the end. So my advice will not change. I think it's still quite relevant. So I see a bunch of questions. So to Brittany White, yes, ask questions here. Mercedes, for literary studies, is it more urgent to fill in gaps in knowledge in terms of theory or in terms of genre you want to focus on, plays, poems, etc.? So again, you have the benefit of hearing from two people today. I would say it's better to fill it in terms of theory. Theory was always my weakness, so I used that summer to add a bit more terminology to my critical a bit more critical terminology to my theory, not to my knowledge of theory. Okay, and I'm glad I did that because when I first encountered Derrida and Foucault as an undergrad, I didn't know what the hell they were talking about. But thankfully, I read some more in that summer, and I figured out what they were trying to say. When I got to the seminar table, I was a little bit more well-versed in what they were talking about, as an example. So I would say it's more important in terms of theory. But it also depends on your background. You may have gone to an undergraduate that was theory-heavy, and you may not need theory. Maybe you need to focus on plays or poems or other literary genres you need to hone in on. But that's my opinion. Tanya, what do you think about Mercedes' question?
And I also think it's a lot to do with your program. I know what my program is theory heavy, and they automatically have a course that you must take. Everyone has to take, and it is theory. And just about every other course was about theory. So yes, I would say if theory, for me, theory was my weakness, and sort of still is, but I still would say fill in the gap with the theory more so, especially if you know your program is about theory. As far as genre, that wasn't a big issue in my program. So, I think it has a lot to do with theory. That has been my experience. Theory is always big because there's so much of it, and it's just a matter of what kind of scholar you want to be. I know that my focus when I first went into the program was I just wanted to do African American drama. Well, in order to be more marketable, my mentor was saying you need to know everything. You need to know a little bit of everything. So if you're sort of deficient in one area, in the genre area, bone up on that. But I think it all depends on what courses are being offered, how they're designed. You won't know till you get there. But you can't go wrong by boning more up on the theory end, I should say.
Because theory will come up all the time at the graduate seminar table, at conferences, when you teach, and certainly when you go on the job market. I was just on the job market, and in different contexts, I was asked a similar question: how do you teach different theories in our department? So it's never a bad idea to hone in on your theory as you prepare for grad school. Okay. Brittany White, I will be going to grad school in the fall. I wanted to know if there is any way to prepare ourselves for the different academic rigor. Huge question, and there are a lot of things you can do to prepare yourself. I think my gut tells me to start reading. If there are any gaps in your knowledge, I would start reading some of that. Any gaps you think that were in your knowledge that you know you have to encounter when you're a grad student, but you haven't encountered yet as an undergrad, I would start by doing that. I would also say know the area very well, the area both of the school and where you'll be living. In terms of the different academic rigor, it is a heavy reading load, so I would start, it's hard, you can't cram theory over the summer, but start reading broadly in terms of your field, whatever field you want to go into. So why don't you skim some of the journals that are the major journals in your field, so that way you can get a hand or have a hand in, or you'll exactly know what are some of the debates in your field, okay? Because a question that will come up regularly, certainly when you write your seminar papers, what scholarly debates are you engaging in? The best way to know about that and the best way to prepare for theory and for some of those debates, reading, or at least if you can't read, at least skim some of the scholarly journals in your field. That way you'll know what the big debates and who the big theories are who are talking right now in your field. Okay?
And
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead, Tanya,
so
please.
I wanted to add too, one thing that was a little help, if your program is really efficient, I was able to go to the website and see what courses were being offered, and usually they were very detailed. And so I was able to get an idea of what may be covered in that course, and that's another way. That's another in into what to start getting ready for, especially when you have to start selecting your courses before coming to campus. At least you have an idea of what books will be covered in that class, and you can start early in that way too.
Hmm. Okay. The next question, is it a good idea to live in student housing for the first year, even if it's a little bit more expensive, so you can get to know the city area and then decide where you want to live for the following 4 or 5 years? That really depends upon the individual. So personally, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer.
Mhm.
I can tell you my own experience. I'm from New York, but I now live in central New Jersey, where I just finished my PhD at Rutgers. I can tell you there is absolutely no way on earth I will live in student housing ever in my life, but that is just my own personal sort of perspective. I need my own space, and I've never lived in a dorm except for the summer I did the IRT, and I personally need my own space, and I want my own autonomy, and I want my own identity that's not, and I want my personal life that's not tethered to the campus. Okay, but the benefit of living in student housing, if you have to make a big move, if you're moving from the West Coast to the East Coast or vice versa, or if you're moving anywhere, anytime you have to make a big move, it's very hard to search for housing when you're moving from a new area, when you're moving far away from a new area to a new, from one area to a new area. It's very hard to make that move. And it's hard to figure out what the housing situation is like if you're on another coast, for example. So the
Indeed.
benefit of being in student housing is that you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about often getting furniture because it's often fully furnished. You wouldn't have to worry about where should I live on the map, what's close to campus. You will already be on campus. The drawback is that you will always be on campus. And for me, I wanted my social life to be separate from being on campus. But I think that's a personal thing, and I really don't think there's a right or wrong answer. But Tanya, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this question.
Well, yeah, I'm similar in that I'm used to having my own space
Hmm.
and being my own person. But I think you need to find out how the housing is set up on campus. Now, I live actually in student housing, but it's not dormitory life. It's just an apartment that's nearby. It's considered on-campus housing,
Hmm.
and it's really designed for graduate students and their families. So it's very community-based. And it's also visiting professors living here, visiting scholars that live here, and some staff people. But technically, I'm not really on campus all the time. I'm actually away from the campus, and so I have a life away from campus. I actually did the research, and I actually had a chance to, when I came to visit the campus, I was able to look at the apartments. I was very selective in how I wanted to live in my space, what I was willing to tolerate, and I actually, technically, I lucked out. I've been in this apartment since I started the program, and the rent has been really good, and it's all inclusive. See, I'm used to New York having the rent, but then having everything included in the rent, and so I
Hmm.
wanted to make sure I had access to the internet all the time to get my work done. I wanted to be able to not have to pay extra for light and gas. So all of that is in what I pay for rent. And I think that you sort of got to know yourself. What are you willing to put up with? Are you willing to have a roommate? I'm not willing to have a roommate.
Hmm.
And so, no, I don't have one. But then there are consequences with that. You are actually paying, you're carrying the bulk of the rent. Can you do it? Um, there are consequences where I'm at. There are consequences if you should move off campus where you're paying your rent, but everything's not included. And on top of that, you have to worry about transportation. I had to consider everything. I didn't have a car when I first moved here for the first 3 years, so I made sure I was near a bus line, several bus lines, so that I can ride the bus in. There's no subway, so you have to know who you are as a person, what you're willing to do, sacrifice. Look at all the pros and cons. When you do visit the campus, when you have an opportunity, talk to other graduate students. That's what I did, and it was very helpful. And then if you have I know in my department we always try to um, put together a mentor for incoming students. And so the incoming students ask us questions and we respond back. And they usually ask me questions about living. That's the biggest thing, what is it like to live as a graduate student? I mean, what do I need to worry about? So um, that's a very important. That was a very good question. Matter of fact, that's something that you really need to consider heavily because where you live does affect how how productive you're gonna be. You need a conducive environment that allows you to work consistently, and that's very important. Just so you can get through the rigors of graduate school.
Absolutely. Well said. Thank you. Absolutely, absolutely. The last, or not maybe not the last question, but the next question, can you all describe how one might read broadly using your own research interest as an example? Sure. So I came into my department, and my field is in African American literature. I came into the program having graduated from Hunter College in Manhattan, knowing sort of American literature and African American literature from the 20th century. My weakness was actually slave narratives, and actually I shouldn't just say that. My weakness starting out, 19th century American and African American literature. So when I said read broadly, part of what I did in the months leading up to, and I had more time to do this because I graduated in January. I didn't begin my degree until the fall. I read some literature from 19th century American and African American texts, from the American and African American canon. So what I'm saying to you is that my specialty is 20th century African American lit, but I wanted to broadly read so that I could say I could do 19th and 20th century American and African American lit. It turned out to be quite important and quite pivotal because when I was on the job market, I was asked to teach. One of the questions I was asked, African American and American literature. And I credit the fact that I started reading broadly in the months leading up to my PhD and being able to say yes and being honest with them. Another way when I say read broadly, because I was so focused on African American lit in undergrad, I didn't necessarily have a really firm background in theory. So I knew a lot of African American lit theory, but when it came to theories, other theories such as psychoanalysis or sort of new criticism, when it comes to literary analysis, those are very important. So I wanted to make sure I had at least an introductory level reading of some of the other theories that are out there, including not just African American, which I know, but psychoanalytic theory and new criticism, and some queer theory and some feminist theory. I needed to bone up on all that if I wanted to engage in some of the scholarly debates that my dissertation eventually engaged in. Okay, so yes, reading broadly it can be taken in any way, shape, or form. I would say for me it was reading some theoretical background, but also knowing that I had a whole century that I was weak in, I wanted to read some of the pivotal texts. Since I knew a lot about Toni Morrison, I didn't know a lot about Mark Twain. I read some Huckleberry, not some. I finished reading Huckleberry Finn. I did Tom Sawyer. I also reread Uncle Tom's Cabin because I knew I wanted to connect it to what I wanted to an argument I was making about racial passing in some of my research for the Mellon program. So it's really reading broadly could be taken any number of ways. It could be reading theory or reading a different century that you're familiar with reading or a different genre, but you have to be the ultimate one to decide what it means to read or what it means to understand where there's a gap in your knowledge and you want to rectify that. Tanya?
Okay, I had a totally different experience.
Okay.
It's really interesting because I'm glad you said reading broadly can be taken many different ways. I was actually forced to read broadly first. So what I mean by that is at Brooklyn College, I had to figure out when I could fit in because I was a creative writing major, so there were certain requirements for that. I had to figure out where to fit in my African American lit, and even then it was minimal. It was minimal. So a lot of times I was reading a lot of things on my own, but I was already reading beyond genres and also across periods. And I think it actually helped me a lot to be able to make those adjustments to my program, because it did change a lot in terms of what they offered. It got to a point where they didn't have any professors who were teaching African American literature and culture at all.
Mm.
I actually had to seek out, outside of my department, a course that could be counted towards building my knowledge base for African American culture, and it worked out to my advantage. But I think this just emphasized that you have to be very proactive in how you want to be known as a scholar, and then so what I can speak to is that even in graduate school, I still was sort of forced to read broadly because there was nothing else in terms of just literature and theory. There was nothing else that was really being offered in terms of my field. But I used it to, what I did in the classroom, I found ways. For example, Victorian Lit course. Took a Victorian Lit course because that was the only thing that was being offered that semester. And I learned a lot in terms of how to begin research in a different way, but very specific to Victorian Lit and looking at that piece of literature. Well, because of my emphasis area in African American literature and culture, I said, well, there has to be something else that I can do that would sort of situate the black experiences, I would say different black experiences during that period. And so I was able to come up, and because one of the assignments was to design a course, a Victorian Lit course, and I was able to design a course out of that, which turned out to be an enlightenment period for me in terms of the beginnings of black radicalism. So sometimes you may have to be very creative with how you approach your own scholarship and how you're going to get that information and really develop your own self as a scholar. So that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
I was forced to read broadly even when I didn't want to.
Remember, if you're getting a PhD, you will have, there's a point where you will have to take your orals exam. Some people call it a master's exam or your qualifying exam or your comps. By that point, they will force you to read broadly. Or at that point, when it comes time to study for your exams, it will force you to read broadly. But again, I always say, why not get a heads up? So if you have the time to read broadly before you begin your PhD, why not do so? And it'll be useful for you anyway from a pedagogical standpoint. You could say to potential employers, look at all that I've taught, look at all that I could teach, because you started reading broadly from before. Okay? The next question. I wondered if you could speak to how you identified your personal academic niche / narrowed your interests. Did you just read broadly and then find yourself gravitating towards certain topics? Did you already know what you wanted to pursue before coming out of undergrad? And are there any advantages to going for a master's to test the waters before a PhD?
Well, I can speak to that.
Okay, good, great. Go ahead, Tanya. Go ahead.
This is one of my side points. When you're going into a graduate program, and I started out as, it was interesting how I was accepted into Michigan State. They offered the master's first. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, but I really wanted the PhD. So I went through their master's program and then eventually into the PhD. It was accepted into the PhD program. But this is what I want to say is that you should be flexible when you go into graduate school. And what I mean by that is I went in saying that I just want to do African American drama. And that was cool, and that was a great start. And I did my master's thesis on African American dramatic literature. But at some point, I needed to kind of expand out. And like John said, when you get to your comps, you're forced to read more broadly. So when you go in, you can come in and say, I'm going to do this, this, and that. But when you take your courses, allow yourself to be to see other things that are possible that can be added into your scholarship. Don't limit yourself. It's okay to come in with something, but allow it to shape. So I'm still doing dramatic literature even with my dissertation. One of the chapters is dedicated to dramatic literature. I'm not losing that love. I'm not giving that up. I refuse to give it up. But my other chapters are on novels, right? So you can come in knowing what you want, but allow yourself to be flexible enough to kind of to really expand on your knowledge base for your field.
Mm-hmm. Yes, let me second all of that. Yes, yes, yes. And I'm glad you went first because you gave me some time to stall and think about how to answer this question. In terms of finding my academic niche, I I took courses in African American Lit and as an undergrad, taking those courses as an undergrad was my introduction to African American Lit. But I can tell you, I found my niche with the help of Octavia Butler. I read Kindred, and that was the first time I ever read. That was the first time I ever read a black woman who wrote about who used tropes from science fiction in her narrative in her slave narrative, and I thought it was phenomenal. Kindred
Mm-hmm.
actually just changed my life in terms of my academic trajectory, because when I read Kindred and I realized, and I took this class, African American Literature with Professor Candace Jenkins at Hunter College. After reading Kindred, I realized this is amazing. I wonder how many more texts are like this in the African American tradition. So reading Kindred, written by Octavia Butler, led me to reading black women writers, and then I went into from black women writers, I went into passing narratives, which is what I did my dissertation on. Okay, so I found it mostly because I took a course in African American Lit, it was not an introductory course, it was a course for English majors who wanted to study that field. And in that course, I was introduced to a text that became pivotal to my own development. Because without that book, I probably would not be here, or may not even be studying racial passing narratives. Okay, to be clear, there's nothing about passing in Octavia Butler's Kindred, but reading her led me to black women writers, which eventually led me to racial passing, the topic of my dissertation. Um, did you know you wanted to pursue? Sorry, did you know what you wanted to pursue coming out of undergrad? Yes, I knew as a result of reading Kindred that I wanted to study African American literature. When I realized, after speaking to other people, other professors of mine of African American literature, that African American lit was only has been canonized recently. By that I mean only in the past, say, 40 years, 30 or 40 years, do you see courses in African American lit, which means the field still has ways and means to go. Okay, so by that was my motivation. I said, well, if the field is so young, and when I say young, compared to, like, Victorian studies or Chaucer studies or you know established European author fields, they've been established and they've been canonized for hundreds and hundreds of years. African American literature is relatively new. So because of that, I said, okay, I'm going to take it upon myself to add to the scholarship when I finish my BA, and that's what I've been doing as a PhD student. Are there any advantages to going for a master's to test the waters before pursuing a PhD? Honestly, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to that. Again, that's one of those questions where you have to know yourself. I went straight from my BA to my PhD. If you get a master's, typically you have to pay for it, and you got to pay out of pocket. I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to get so let me say it differently. When you go for your PhD, you can earn your master's degree en route to the PhD, and it's usually going to be free. Okay, so I knew going in, okay, I'm in this PhD program. I'm going to enroll in the PhD program and get my master's en route. If by that point, when I pass my exams, when I take my comms, if by that point I feel burnt out or I'm not ready to pursue the PhD, then I'll at least have a free master's degree. So that's one of the benefits of getting a PhD or enrolling in the PhD program. You can earn a master's degree en route to the PhD without paying for it separately. And then that will be your built-in way of testing the waters. Okay? Go for your PhD right afterwards. A lot of people make this misconception. If you go for your PhD afterwards, you're still earning a master's degree, because the goal of comps or orals or qualifying exams, whatever you call it, the goal for that is for you to get your master's degree halfway through your PhD program. Okay, Tanya, did you want to add to any of that?
And also, one of the things that we want to make very clear, a master's degree is the teaching degree, and the PhD is the research degree.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to, once again, what is it you really want to do? Do you want to do just teaching? I mean, you still going to do research, but for a lot of programs, they won't even allow you to teach. I know at Howard University, you have to have your master's degree in hand before they even assign you a course. It's a little different here at Michigan State. They have you teach while you're pursuing your master's degree, and so it makes you a little bit more marketable if you're studying and teaching. You're building up your skills in both areas, but just keep in mind there are clear distinctions. Master's is for teaching. PhD is for research. And if you're really interested in research, then you'll go for the PhD.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Would you recommend getting credit for courses taken while getting a master's degree, or is it better to take advantage of the opportunity to take more courses while getting the PhD? Would it make me more competitive in the job market to take more courses? So honestly, every department, not, I wouldn't say school, every department is different. Some departments, oh, well, let me put it differently. Many departments will say we might give you credit for one or two courses, but ultimately, each department would like to brand their students according to their own standards. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and branding is not to be taken pejoratively. It's really they want when you're on the market, do you say you're a student from this campus that you have identifiable traits that you know how to do research, you know how to do theory, and you know how to teach. You have identifiable traits for that particular department. So I don't. So every school will be different. Every department will tell you something different. Some departments might take a course or two. Others will say, hell no, we will not take anything. You have to take courses. You have to take all your courses here. That's really a question you have to determine between you and your department. Okay. Will it make you more competitive on the job market to take more courses? I don't know. I think what would make you competitive would be if there's a chance for you as a PhD student, if there's a certificate program you could take, make you more competitive. For example, at Rutgers in my department, we have the option of taking a certificate in women's and gender studies. That would show when I'm if whoever chooses to do that, you have a specialty in whatever your specialty is in, and then you have a certificate in women's gender studies. You'd be able to teach and do research in whatever in those two fields. Okay, that might make you more competitive. Having another certificate under your belt. I don't necessarily think that taking more master's courses will make you more competitive, but having courses that are geared towards some type of certificate, whether it's in the field or in teaching and pedagogy, also very important. Okay, Tanya?
I was looking at the screen of her questions. I'm not sure if
Mm-hmm.
she's talking about an acceleration program. I know that
Oh, okay.
certain, like I know my program, I don't know if they
Mm-hmm.
still have it. I don't really think they do.
Mm-hmm.
But you can apply for an acceleration, whereas it takes
I
like a
see.
year, and
Mm-hmm.
you're obtaining a PhD, but you're not really taking more credits. It's not really about more credits as much as you doing your course, doing maybe you're still doing a when I think back, you're eliminating 1 year of coursework, or it's
Mm.
one semester to 2 semesters of coursework, and that's it. And that's only if you can produce a master's thesis after your first year of coursework, and then
Mm.
they'll consider it, and you have to apply. I did do that, but I didn't accelerate. And sometimes it depends on the program. Our program is really based on funding, so you can have 3 people going for it, which happened in my program, and only one get to do the acceleration.
Mm.
So you still end up having to do the masters. But because I demonstrated interest in that and still applied for the PhD program, I still got into. I was accepted in the PhD program. So if it's real, it's not. You can finish early with your PhD degree, but it all depends on how your department is set up. And it's not really about being more competitive, because there's so many other factors that go into being more competitive with these degrees.
Mm-hmm. 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 The next question: what is the difference between getting a graduate between a graduate program that admits for master's degree and then evaluates you for entrance for the PhD program versus the new type of straight PhD program being offered? Which is harder? Hmm.
Mm, I don't know. I didn't have that experience.
Me neither.
I didn't have that experience, but graduate school is graduate school. Um, the
Hmm.
Our master students meet with the PhD students. We're all in the same courses together here, so we're all required to do the same amount of work. It's just the number of credits applied towards the degree, and we're willing, what program you're willing to go through, and which program you're actually a part of. You need to know what program you're a part of.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a straight PhD, you go straight from the bachelor's to the PhD. You're gonna still, I mean, the master students are still gonna be in the same boat as you. You're still doing the same coursework.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. to me, I don't know if there's, well, I don't see a big quantifiable difference between the two institutions. The process is just a little bit differently. You know, I could tell you I applied to many schools because many of you know this, I did the IRT program. So as a result of that, I had the privilege of applying to many schools.
Right.
Half the schools I applied to said, I applied to 10 schools. Half the schools, 5 of them said, you are able to, you can join our program. You have to get your master's first and then your PhD. Other
Right.
schools said, just go right to your PhD. I don't think there's a harder or right or wrong or better way to do it. I personally chose the PhD route only because I wanted to get no time. I was not no time. I wanted to get done. And it felt to be able to take less time to get a PhD than to get a master's and then a PhD. It just felt that way to me. But if you need a right or wrong answer in terms of harder, like Tanya said, you will still be in coursework with a master and PhD student, so you still got to submit the same type of work for your professor. Okay? Are all grad students evaluated every year, regardless of being funded? As
I
far as
didn't see the
yes, because professors, the department would like to know when you can get progress towards a degree. Funding or no funding, you're still sitting there, and professors in the department would like to know how your progress is, how well your progress is as you work towards getting your PhD or whatever degree you're working on. Am I right, Tanya?
I didn't hear the question because it was breaking up over here. What was the question again?
Are all graduate students evaluated every year, regardless of being fully funded?
Interesting. You got to know your program. I just got an evaluation and I haven't had it before.
Okay.
I think now they're just being a little bit more alert because technically we're under new management, as I like to say it. Now they're making it mandatory that we have the evaluation done. But I think also it depends on the program. I know with us, they kind of monitor not just your grades, but they sort of monitor, like when we apply for assistantships, even though you may have a package, you still have to apply for the assistantships, and so that sort of speaks to where you are in the program. And so it serves as an evaluation of, you know, where you are with your GPA, but also your work history there as far as a teaching assistant. So I think that's how they were doing. But the recent evaluation was saying other things, such as have you been published, have you attended conferences, that those sort of things.
Okay, so
every program is different, so find out.
Yes, yes, every program is different. No, don't apologize. Every program is different. So the onus is on you to find out what the evaluative requirements are every time you go, when you go to campus visits, or even if you could find out beforehand, you want to find out how you'll be evaluated in that department. I will say it's now 4 o'clock, and we should be wrapping up relatively soon, like now. So are there any final questions we could answer in the final few moments? Okay, I will take your silence as a sign that it's time for us to get going, but that doesn't mean the conversation must end. I will add my email address here, and you can email me your questions at any time, at any point. Anya,
I can do the same.
Add yours as well?
Sure.
So where you ask questions right there, you should see my email address. It should be there any second now. Feel free to ask any questions you have about grad school at any level. Ask any questions for me or Tanya. Okay. We're both melons, so we get through this process, and we want to share our wealth of knowledge with you. Okay.
Yes. They'll over here too.
Okay, so I will conclude this discussion. Thank you everyone for this webinar today and the webinar series this year. I appreciate your participation. Please keep in touch. Please let us know how, if there are any questions we can answer for you. Let us know how you're doing in terms of you apply to and where you get accepted. All right. Thank you very, very much. Take good care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye, Tanya.
Okay, bye-bye.